Hello everybody, welcome back. This is my third set from books A to Z. This is my second time filming it. The first time it was like an hour long and I was like, no, we need to condense this. And set 3, I read them from March 19th through April 20th. So I am very much behind on my books A to Z videos. But I will tell you all the books going down. And if you want to know about any of them a little more extensively, you can definitely comment in the comment. You can definitely leave a comment below. And I will do my best to answer. And you can also follow me on Goodreads, which will be linked in the description box. So we have Archie Volume 3. I have enjoyed that comic series. And that is by Mark Waid. Bowl Away by Elizabeth McCracken. This is about a woman who was older. Well, I guess. But I guess she was... This story takes place like in the early 1900s when automobiles were being invented. And it's about a woman who shows up in the middle of town. No one knows where she came from. She won't say where she's from. But everyone gravitates towards her. She starts a candlepin bowling business. There we go. Like a bowling alley, but it's with candlepin bowling. It's with candlepins like they do in the New England states. She married a black man who was against automobiles. He walked everywhere. He was from Canada. And she dies. And we find out that she actually had a family before she showed up in this town. And she had been in love with the black doctor for years. Because her son, who shows up in town, who just causes mayhem, he knew about the man. It was interesting. It wasn't amazing, but it's one of the books that editors are talking about this year. King's Cage by Victoria Aveyard. This is book 3 of the Red Queen series. Mare had surrendered herself to King Maven. And we watched that happen. And that's book 3. There is a book 4. And they have just recently come out with a book 5. Dry by Neil and Gerard Schusterman. 5 stars for that book. It is a tale about the state of California not having water. And the state, what is it, Colorado and Utah maybe, they cut off water to the state of California because they need to preserve it for themselves. So you watch these people, you watch the story through several eyes, and they try to survive, try to find water. But it's a story where this can happen anywhere. And not just not having water at all, having clean, accessible drinking water. And that is something that is happening in cities, in states across the United States because of the infrastructure. People aren't replacing the 100-year-old pipes. And, you know, they're getting older. And the chemicals needed to treat water are leaching lead from those lead-based pipes. That has happened in Flint. It has happened in a city in Mississippi. It has happened to a city in Northern California. There are other places. They talk about Flint because that is a man-made situation where the government actually instituted that they should use this polluted water. And yeah. So it's a really good book, but it's definitely, the thrill is that this can happen anytime, anywhere, any place. The Tale of Emily Winsnap by Liz Kessler. This is for younger readers, but you could, I read it, so whatever. But it's about an 11-year-old girl who goes swimming for the first time and finds out she's a mermaid. And she finds out who her father is, and she gets to be reunited with him. The Care and Feeding of Ravenously Hungry Girls by Anissa Gray. This is a story set in St. Joseph, Michigan, which is outside of Benton Harbor, which is on the western coast of Michigan. And it is about a family. And what kicks off this story is the older sister, Athena, and her husband, Proctor, have been arrested for fraud and embezzlement. They owned a diner / grocery store. They were taking EBT cards, which is how people receive food who are low income. And they would, probably pay them 50 cents on a dollar, and then turn around and use those bridge cards to buy items for their restaurant. And they also set up a nonprofit fundraiser thing to help the people that were struggling in the community, and no one ever got the money. And one of their twin daughters ended up calling the government and the FBI and reporting her mother. She didn't realize she would lose her father in the process. And then we get to see the siblings come to, the youngest sibling ends up with guardianship of the twins, and we find out that the brother Joe, who the older sister is closest to, he is verbally abusive, emotionally abusive. So the middle sister and the younger sister are working to keep the brother from gaining custody of the girls. And you find out about their lives, and that the older sister and the brother had resentment toward the younger sister because the father kept her, not realizing that the father kept her because the brother was abusive to her. And it was a good book. We got to meet some characters. And like the older sister, Athena, who went to prison, like, she didn't want to take responsibility for, it was like she had a disconnect between her taking responsibility for her actions. An Anonymous Girl by Greer Hendricks and Sarah Peekinen. This, single white female vibes. The main character, well, I guess there's two of them, the doctor and the professor, and the makeup artist. The makeup artist needed cash, so she ended up doing this study, and the professor, who was ahead of the study, she was playing psychological mind games. She was a toxic narcissist. Nothing she did was wrong. Everyone else wronged her, and she had to pay them back because they weren't going to get paid back the way she wanted them to. It was just like a lot of single white female vibes in there, and there was just blaring flags, like, no. But then at the epilogue, they tried to touch on the fact that the professor didn't understand people who live paycheck to paycheck, and that they would do things for money that they may not have if they had the luxury of having money, because she would be paid like $200 an hour to do things and, you know, like flirt with guys or, you know, do XYZ. But they just like touched on it at the end just to like stamp it on there. Moby Dick by Herman Melville. Ishmael and Quay Quay 5 Ever. Captain Ahab. He is very much the poster boy for do not let your obsessions cloud you and prevent you. You know, you put on blinders to everything else around you. You only see getting to your white whale. And people were dying on his ship, on his boat, falling off twice, 3 times. And he didn't care. Like, people would try to drag their shipmates out. Or he'd be like, oh, somebody will find them later. He didn't care. And it's also, don't blindly follow somebody else. Like, think for yourself. If it's not okay, you can say it's not okay and try to leave the situation. Internment by Samira Ahmed. This is about Muslim Americans being sent to camps. They were interned. First, they were sequestered into their homes. They couldn't go to work, couldn't go to school. Then the government broke down the doors in the middle of the night and dragged them away to this camp set up in the middle of the desert, where they were people that were ahead of the camp were violent towards them. They didn't get, everything was monitored. They didn't get to speak to the outside world. And there were some of the people inside the camp, the doctors and some of the soldiers who were working, trying to show the world what was really happening in these internment camps. And they got to, you know, in the end, they got to go home. But that was that, you know. It could happen to them again. There's no safety in knowing that they let me go, but they could take me back again. And that's something that can happen. It's happening to Latinx people right now. And their children are dying because they're being separated. Let's keep going, Lori. Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I really enjoyed this. I listened to the audio with the cast. Benjamin Pratt is going to be in this movie. I really liked finding out who the interviewer was. Deadly Class Volume 2, Kids of the Black Hole by Rick Remender and Wesley Craig. Noble Hops by Layla Rain. Emily Winsnap and the Monster from the Deep. So that was book 2 to Emily Winsnap. She unleashed the Kraken. Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman. This one is a story about a man who lives in above ground London. He lives in London. And only he saw this girl hurt on the street, and he took her up to his apartment. And he ends up getting tangled up into what's going on below in underground London. So he takes her back to underground London, and then he goes back above ground. Nobody knows him. Nobody sees him. Nobody sees him. Nobody knows him. Okay. So he goes back above ground London. Nobody knows him. Nobody sees him. His apartment is rented out. He doesn't have a job. His ex she doesn't recognize him. So then he goes back below ground because he needs to figure out how to get his life back. He wants his boring life back. So he goes through all these trials and tribulations. He finally conquers the trials and he goes back to above ground London. People notice him now. People see him. He was promoted at his job. He got his apartment back, plus recompense because they either sold or threw his belongings away. His ex comes back into the picture. But now he misses the adventure of underground London. And one of the underground London characters comes back and off he goes back to underground London. There is a book 2 in the works. Neil Gaiman is working on it. It'll come out when it comes out. Where the Crawdads Sing by Delilah. It's not Delilah. It's Delia. Delia Owens. This is about Kai, a little marsh girl. That's what they call her, marsh girl. They are very cruel to her. The church folk, which, that's so annoying. But she learns to survive on her own after her siblings and her mother leave. They just walk away and never come back and leave her with her alcoholic father. And then for a time he does clean up and he pays her to maintain the house so she's able to buy things, but then he reverts and he never comes back, so she has to figure out how to survive on her own. So she meets Jumpin' Jack and his wife, and they're a black couple who run the gas station for boats. You know, they're on the water. And they help her as much as they can. He buys, I think she's mussels, I think is what she, oh my goodness. She fishes, I guess. She catches, Kai catches mussels, I believe, so she can sell them. And she realizes she doesn't have to go into town because Jumpin' Jack has everything she needs there. Grits, matches, butter. And his wife collects clothes, so she'll have clothes and she'll have shoes for the first time. And Jumpin' Jack and his wife, you know, they become parent figures for her. She meets a guy named Tate who is one of her brothers. He used to know her brother, and he teaches her to read. And once she learns to read, she's reading, writing, and then she meets Chase, some dude named Chase. He's the star football player, and he promises her, you know, the world, that, you know, he says all the nice flowery things to her, and she believes him, and he's engaged to someone else, and then she's accused of his murder. And, you know, we go through the trial and the whodunit, and it's just a really good book. I enjoyed it. The Death of Archie, A Life Celebrated by Paul, what's his name? Kupperberg. This one was the end of this Archie series where there was like parallel universes. In one universe, Archie was married to Betty, and the other one, he was married to Veronica. We never found out who was his wife in this one because they were both there. They were both sad, but he did end up having 2 children. It's just a really good story. It showed how Archie affected everyone in Riverdale. We have Queenie by Candace Carty Williams. This is supposed to be like Bridget Jones' Diary. And It's about a girl named Queenie, and she has been in a long-term relationship with her boyfriend, and he decides they need to take a break. So she thinks they're on a break. He broke up with her, but we see her fill her time with random guys that she has sex with, and she keeps going back to the free clinic, but she refuses to use condoms. She's not appreciating herself and respecting herself to actually use a condom. And the people at the clinic keep thinking she is being assaulted because she is having rough sex, and she finally starts to get her life. She starts to take control of her own life and make choices that will benefit herself. Let's see. Summer Hours at the Robbers Library by Sue Halpern. I love this book. It is about 3 random individuals who end up at Robbers Library, and they're all there for different reasons. All right. So Kit is there because she's running away from her life, her former life. Sunny is there because she was mandated by a judge to serve community service at the library. And then Rusty is there because he is looking into a bank that used to be there because he found a bank book. Man, they don't even make bank books. But he found a bank book for a bank in that city, and he wanted to find out because he had lost his job, and I think he was just looking for a little adventure and a little cash, But they each find in the trio something that they weren't necessarily looking for, but they needed, which was a family. Shout by Lori Halsey or Hals Anderson. This is her follow-up book because it's poetry, and it was about when she would go on, she was doing school tours for her first book and this all deals with rape and sexual assault. And she was talking about how she would, and then when the schools realized what it was about, then she'd have to go to book colleges or bookstores, or somebody would house her, have the event in their home or something. And male, students, or there was a janitor, he had said, I never knew what to give the name for what happened to me until I heard you speak. And that's what a lot of it was, that they felt seen through her work, that they could put a name to what happened to them. The Fellowship of the Ring. This was from Lord of the Rings. This is the first book by J.R.R. Tolkien. I love this book so much. Oh, it's so good. I recommend it. It is a dense book because you have worlds and names, but it's such a good book. I'm trying to look at the book too. Sing Unburied, Sing by Jasmine Ward. This is an African-American family. It centers around JoJo, who is 13. JoJo is mixed. His father, Michael, is in prison. JoJo lives with his mother's parents. And Michael is at Parchment, which is the prison in their state. It's up north. Pop, who is JoJo's maternal grandfather, has been there before because he got caught up in something his brother did. And all these stories intertwine, and JoJo, he can see the ghost of a young boy who's no older than he was, who was at Parchment parchment at the same time as Pop Pop. So he comes back with them. And he wants JoJo to get Pop Pop to tell his story. Tell how he died and what happened. And he's finally able to do that. And Michael's white grandparents, his grandfather, who he's named after, Big Joseph, wants nothing to do with him. And JoJo's mother, she can see the ghost of her brother who was killed by one of Michael's cousins. So, yeah, it's real messy, real messy, but it was a good story. Glass Sword by Victoria Aveyard. That's book 2 from the Red Queen series. Wait by Jeanette Winterson. This was a retelling of Atlas and Hercules. Well, the myth of Atlas and Hercules. Atlas ends up having to carry the whole entire world on his back. And Hercules is more brawn than brain. And he thinks he can handle holding the world, so Atlas can go get 3 golden apples for him. And Atlas thinks that he'll be able to see his daughters one more time, and Hercules can't handle the weight. And then Hera is always out to get Hercules because he is the bastard son of Zeus. It was very short and it was very interesting. Beast of Extraordinary Circumstance by Ruth Emmy Lang. This is about a young boy named Waylon who has spent 6 years living with wolves after his parents died when he's 5 years old by a storm he created. He can start storms. He can't necessarily stop storms. And there's a young girl named Mary who works for the butcher. And she and Waylon meet when he needs meat to feed the wolves and himself, because in their travels they keep traveling because they're looking for prey. And he runs out of money, so he has to leave town. Mary runs away with him for a week. They are caught, and Waylon is sent to Oklahoma to live with a pastor and his wife. The wife does not want him. And he's a little odd because he spent his whole life living with wolves. He was raised by wolves. And we just see Mary and Waylon interacting, coming near each other all throughout the story. Different points of their lives, they meet up again. Astrophysics for Young People in a Hurry by Neil deGrasse Tyson. This was read to me by LeVar Burton. I would have loved this book as a youth. It's just full of Neil deGrasse Tyson's love of astrophysics, which is about the planetary system, but also gravity, push-pull. I think if I would have read that as a younger child, like that could have been like something I would have pursued. Let's be real. Now Lori wants to pursue astrophysics. American Street by E.B. Zaboy. This is the third E.B. Zaboy story that I've read. This is about Fabiola, who comes from Haiti to take care of her sick aunt. Her and her mother come from Haiti to take care of her sick aunt in Detroit. Fabiola's mother is detained in New Jersey, and Fabiola is sent on to Detroit. So we watch her try to adjust to life in Detroit. She meets a boy. Things go awry. And then we watch the family try to pull together, and it was a good story. It was a little weird, and then we got a flow. But I'm sure that's how people who immigrate to the United States feel too. And then I read Black Leopard, Red Wolf by Marlon James. This is supposed to be the first book in a trilogy. There is a lot of sex that happens in this book, and only once was it heterosexual sex, and that was like dubious consent at best. Because a ruler, queen lady, she keeps making children, and she doesn't keep the babies. The boys are like banished. She only keeps the girls. It was a weird thing, but it was beautiful. Like, there was so much world building in this African country. It was beautiful. It's like over 600 pages, but it is beautiful. Beautiful. I highly recommend it. The Dead Queens Club by Hannah Kaplan. I love this. This was a retelling of Henry VIII and all of his wives. And this was set in a high school, so it was all his girlfriends. 2 of his girlfriends end up dead. And the other teenagers in Henry's orbit band together to figure out what really happened. And they do find out what happened. Nancy Drew, The Palace of Wisdom by Kelly Thompson and Jen St. Ong. This, I thought it was a novel. It's actually a graphic novel. It's about Nancy Drew. She had left her town like 7 years prior when her mother died. And she gets a note saying something to the effect about her mother's death, and it's a connection to this. So she comes back. Her mother's death was not connected to this murder, but she figures out who did it, and then she's arrested. So now I'm waiting for the next book. Okay, you guys, that was set number 3. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please hit that thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please do. I would love to have you. And if you've already subscribed, thank you very much. I want you guys to be safe, be well. Peace.